The house was quiet, in the way only lived-in houses become quiet. Not peaceful, not calm, just still, like something holding its breath. The kind of quiet that remembers arguments long after the voices are gone. Ethan sat alone at the dining table, staring at a coffee cup that had gone cold an hour ago. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, each second landing heavier than the last. He noticed it now because no one was talking to him. No one was asking him anything. No one was waiting for his response. And that felt unfamiliar. For most of his life, Ethan had been the one explaining himself, filling silences, defending decisions that never should have needed defense. He was the guy who smoothed things over, who clarified, who made sure people understood him. He thought that made him strong, reasonable, mature. What he didn't realize was that every explanation was a quiet surrender. The memory came back to him suddenly, uninvited. A meeting room, glass walls, 6 people around a polished table, his manager leaning back in his chair, smirking slightly. "So, do you want to explain why this project failed?" Ethan remembered the way his chest tightened, the way his mouth opened immediately, almost automatically. "Well, see, there were a few factors." He talked for 5 minutes straight, gave context, took partial blame, explained obstacles no one had asked about. By the time he finished, the room was silent again, not impressed, not convinced, just confirmed. Confirmed that he was the one who could be questioned, pressed, put on the spot. That pattern followed him everywhere, at work, with friends, even with family, especially with family. His older brother Mark had mastered a different language, a language Ethan never learned growing up. Silence. Mark could say something sharp, dismissive, even cruel, and then go quiet. No defense, no justification, no softening, just stillness. And somehow that stillness bent the room around him. At family dinners, when Mark criticized Ethan's career choice, "Still doing that freelance thing?" Ethan would laugh awkwardly and start explaining the market, the flexibility, the long-term plan. Mark would nod slowly, say nothing else, and change the subject. Later, Ethan would replay the moment in his head, realizing he'd lost something invisible. Respect, maybe, or authority, or both. The worst part wasn't the disrespect itself, it was how quickly people got used to it. Disrespect, Ethan learned too late, doesn't arrive loudly. It sneaks in during moments when you rush to be understood, when you over-clarify, when you try too hard to be seen as reasonable. People don't consciously decide to disrespect you, they sense permission. That night, sitting alone at the table, Ethan felt the weight of that truth settle into his body, heavy, uncomfortable, undeniable. He thought about the last argument with his girlfriend, Rachel. She'd accused him of being emotionally unavailable. The irony almost hurt. "You never say what you really think," she said, arms crossed. "I do," he replied quickly. Maybe I don't say it the right way. What I mean is..." And there it was again, explaining, softening, adjusting himself to fit someone else's expectation of clarity. Rachel sighed, already disengaging. "You're doing it again," she said. "You're explaining instead of just standing there." Standing there, the phrase haunted him, because standing there meant silence, and silence felt dangerous, like losing control, like letting the other person define the moment. Ethan had always believed that silence meant weakness, that if you didn't speak, you lost. If you didn't respond, you were conceding. But what if that belief was wrong? What if silence wasn't absence, but pressure? He remembered watching a documentary late one night, unable to sleep. A strategist talking about historical power dynamics, about how leaders who spoke less were often feared more, how restraint created gravity. One line stuck with him. The person who breaks silence first is usually the one who needs something. At the time, he dismissed it as dramatic. Now it felt uncomfortably accurate. "Think about it," he told himself. "Every time you rush to explain, what are you really saying? Please don't misunderstand me. Please don't think badly of me. Please don't judge me. It was a quiet plea for approval, and approval is never power. The realization didn't come as a sudden epiphany. It came slowly, like a bruise forming under the skin. Painful, but impossible to ignore. Over the next few days, Ethan started noticing silence everywhere. At work, during meetings, the people who spoke the least were listened to the most. When they did speak, the room leaned in. When they didn't, the room waited. At a cafe, he watched a man calmly hold eye contact with a barista who had made a mistake with his order. No anger, no explanation, just presence. The barista apologized immediately and fixed it with, "Silence works differently once people notice it. At first, it confuses them, then it unsettles them, and finally, if you hold it long enough, it exposes them." Ethan didn't intend for that to happen. He wasn't trying to intimidate anyone. He wasn't trying to play games. He simply stopped offering himself up for judgment, stopped narrating his own worth, stopped asking to be understood. And that absence of explanation began to disturb people who were used to having access to him. The first real test came at work. During a weekly meeting, the same manager who once cornered him leaned forward again, pen tapping against the table. "So," he said, "this timeline slipped. Care to explain?" Every eye turned toward Ethan. Old Ethan would have felt his throat tighten, would have rushed to clarify context, justify delays, absorb responsibility that didn't belong to him. Instead, he looked at the manager calmly and said nothing. The silence wasn't aggressive, it wasn't dramatic, it was neutral, clean. The manager raised an eyebrow. "I'm asking you something," he said. Ethan nodded slowly. "I heard you." Another pause. "Well?" the manager pushed. Ethan leaned back in his chair, his hands rested loosely in his lap. "The timeline is updated," he said evenly. "You have it in front of you." That was it. No apology, no explanation, no emotional padding. The room felt different, thicker, like the air had weight. Someone coughed. Another person shifted in their seat. The manager glanced down at the document, then back up. He opened his mouth, closed it, then cleared his throat. "All right," he said, "let's move on." Ethan felt it then. Not pride, not victory, alignment. For the first time, his external behavior matched his internal sense of self. He wasn't trying to convince anyone of his competence. He was operating from it. But silence doesn't just remove weakness, it invites resistance. Some people sense the shift and adjust. Others feel threatened by it. Rachel was the second category. At first, she thought Ethan was pulling away. "You've been quiet lately," she said one night, sitting on the edge of the couch. "Is something wrong?" Ethan looked at her for a moment before answering. He chose his words carefully. "No," he said, "nothing's wrong." She frowned. "You don't talk like you used to." He nodded. "I know." That answer frustrated her more than a denial would have. "What does that mean?" she asked. "Are you upset with me?" Ethan stayed silent. The pause stretched. Rachel crossed her arms. "This is exactly what I mean," she said. "You shut down instead of communicating." Ethan didn't react immediately. He watched her closely, not defensively, observationally. "I'm communicating," he said calmly. "I'm just not explaining myself." "That's not communication," she snapped. "It is," he replied. "It's just not reassurance." That landed harder than he expected. Rachel stood up, pacing. "So now you're just going to sit there and say nothing?" she demanded. Ethan met her eyes. His voice was steady. "I'll talk when there's something to say," he said. "Not when I'm being pushed." She stopped pacing. Something flickered across her face. Confusion, irritation, maybe fear. This version of him didn't argue, didn't defend, didn't collapse into explanation. It forced her to confront her own discomfort. "You've changed," she said quietly. "Yes," Ethan replied. "I have." Silence doesn't make you invisible, it makes you undeniable. People start projecting meaning onto it. They assume intention where none was given. They fill the gap with their own narratives. At work, Ethan noticed colleagues speculating about him. Some assumed confidence, others assumed arrogance, a few assumed strategy. He let them. The truth was simpler. He had stopped leaking energy. Every explanation cost something: attention, authority, emotional labor. When you stop paying that cost, you gain leverage, not over others, but over yourself. And self-control is the foundation of every other kind of power. Mark noticed it too. At a family gathering, Mark made another comment, half joking, half cutting. "Careful," he said loudly. "Ethan's probably analysing us all now." The table laughed nervously. Ethan smiled faintly and said nothing. Mark waited for a comeback, a defence, a joke. None came. The laughter faded. Mark shifted uncomfortably. "I'm just kidding," he added. Ethan nodded once. That was all. Later that night, Mark approached him privately. "You good?" Mark asked. Ethan looked at him. "Yeah." "You seem different," Mark said. "Just checking." Ethan held his gaze, not challengingly, not submissively. "I'm good," he repeated. Mark hesitated, then nodded. For the first time in years, he didn't push. What Ethan was learning, slowly, painfully, was that silence strips away the illusion of control others think they have over you. When you don't react, they lose their reference point.